So today's video is going to be on how to complete the square for parabolas. The two forms that we have for parabolas are up here in the box. Remember from what your teachers taught you in class that only one variable is squared, either the x or the y. So the steps that I'm going to be doing today are outlined in this box, and we're going to follow it in the example below. So the first step says to separate the variables on opposite sides of the equal sign, making sure to move the constant to the side with the non-squared variable. So we're going to go ahead and begin with the first example here, and we're going to do as it says, separate the variables, moving the constant to the side with the non-squared variables. So the x in this case is the one that's squared, so we are going to add 4y to both sides, and we're going to add 8 to both sides so that our variables are now separated. So when we simplify, we get x squared minus 4x equals 4y plus 8. Okay, so now we've done step 1. So now going on to step 2, it says complete the square on the side where the variable is squared. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to rewrite it above, leaving myself actually a little space to complete the square here. So just like we did with ellipses and hyperbolas, we're going to complete the square by taking half of this number, so by taking b over 2 and then squaring it. So if I take half of negative 4, divide it by 2, and square it, I get 4. So I'm going to go ahead and add it right there. Then it says to balance the equation. So I'm going to go ahead and add 4 on this side as well. Okay, and now my equation is nice and balanced. Okay, so moving on to this step. It says factor the side with the squared variable. So I'm going to take my 3 terms here, and just like we did with ellipses and hyperbolas, I'm going to factor it into x plus whatever b is divided by 2. So in this case, because our b is negative 4, when we divide by 2, we get negative 2 squared. Then I am going to clean up the right side by combining the two like terms 8 and 4 to get me 4y plus 12. Moving on to the next step. Factor out the greatest common factor from the side with the non-squared variable. So this is the same sort of thing that we had to do when we were graphing parabolas. We have to factor out that 4. So I'm going to go ahead, factor out the 4, which when I divide by each of these terms by 4, I get y plus 3. I'm going to carry down this part. This is not changing at all. And I get here. Now we're very close to being in the form where we're ready to graph it, but just like in class, we need to get this 4 to the other side, and so we can do that by multiplying both sides of the equation by 1/4. So 1/4 and 4 will cancel, leaving just y plus 3, and then the left side will stay exactly the same. And then we're good. And then just like you did in class, this bottom number is your 4p, and you could go on from there and graph. Okay, so let's do one more example. And again, when you're trying this on your own, all of these steps are listed right up here in the box. Okay, so turning to the back, we'll do one more example. Again, separate the variables, move the constant to the side with the non-squared variable. So in this case, when I'm looking, y squared is the squared variable. So I'm going to subtract 6y from both sides, and that's going to get me y squared minus 6y minus 3 minus 6x equals 0. I still have some more work to do. I have my two y terms together. Now I'm going to add 3 and add 6x to both sides so that my variables are separated. When I simplify, that gets me y squared minus 6y equals, I'm going to rearrange these two terms, 6x plus 3. Okay, moving on to the next step. I'm going to complete the square on the variable that is squared by adding b over 2 squared. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. This is my b. I'm going to take negative 6, divide it by 2, and then square it, which is going to get me 9. So I add 9 to the left, and then it says balance the equation, so I'm going to add 9 to the right as well. Okay, now we are going to, let me just clean up a little bit and simplify here. So the right side will become 6x, and when I add the 9 plus 3, I get 12. And I'm going to carry down these three terms. Y squared minus 6y plus 9. Okay, now I'm ready to factor the side with the squared variable into the x plus b over 2. So y, I take my middle number, my b, divide it in half to get negative 3, and then I square it. And then I have the 6x plus 12 on the right. Okay, next step, factor out the greatest common factor. So on the right, again, just like we've been doing in class, we factor out the 6. That gets us x plus 2 in parentheses, and the left side stays the same. Okay, and again, just like we did before, we need to move the 6 to the other side, to the side with the squared variable, and we can do that by multiplying by 1/6 on both sides. So 6 times 1/6 cancels to give us 1, leaving behind x plus 2, and then 1/6 y minus 3 squared. And so that's the process. So what I'd like you to do is to try one on your own. So go ahead, you can pause the video, try this on your own, and then when you're ready, you can turn back on the video and I'm going to work out this problem so you can check your answer. So the first step here, like before, you should have separated the variables. Then we need to complete the square on each side. So you should have added 4 to each equation, to each side of the equation. When I clean up the right side, I get 3y minus 12, and the left side can stay the same. Then, hopefully you factored this side into x plus 2 squared, and then factored out the 3, which is the greatest common factor here, and that would get you y minus 4. And then like we did before, we need to multiply by the reciprocal. So the 3 and the 1/3 cancel, giving you 1/3 x plus 2 squared equals y minus 4. And that is your final answer.